The company that underpaid me now wires me thousands every week just to keep things running. When I graduated from university, I already had a foot in the door with a mid-sized company. I'd been working there as a contractor during school, and somehow, despite being just one person, I ended up handling everything technical for a few hundred employees. Servers, databases, web systems, APIs, testing, deployment, you name it. It was mine. It was intense, but I had full control over the environment, which made it bearable. After graduation, management changed hands. The new leadership team offered me a full-time position for $70,000. It was well below the going rate for what I did. People with half my workload were making at least $110,000 in similar positions. But I wasn't just thinking about the money. I knew I still had some gaps in my experience, and this place gave me total autonomy. If I stayed a bit longer, I could build out my skills, then move on when the time was right. We negotiated, and they bumped the offer to $72,000 with a clear agreement, written and signed by both sides, that after 6 months, we'd review my salary and I'd get at least a 15% raise. Sounded fair. I accepted, feeling optimistic. 6 months went by. I'd filled every gap in my knowledge, introduced new frameworks, streamlined operations, and made the systems faster and more stable than ever. But when the 6-month mark arrived, management went completely silent. I sent calendar invites, emails, gentle reminders, nothing. After 3 weeks of waiting, I went to HR. The HR rep looked stunned, checked my file, and quickly arranged a meeting for that same afternoon. That's when the fun began. My manager walked into my office later that day, smiled, and said, "Good news, you're getting a raise." Then he told me the number, 1%. I kept my expression neutral, reached into my folder, and handed him a copy of the signed offer letter. The color drained from his face. He stammered something about budget restrictions and said they'd look into it. 2 weeks later, they came back offering 6%. They blamed fairness, budgets, market standards, all the usual excuses. I nodded, thanked them, and accepted the offer. Outwardly, I stayed calm. Inwardly, I started planning my exit. Over the next few months, I quietly rebuilt every major system from the ground up, using the most modern and complex frameworks available. I upgraded everything to the latest architecture, optimized performance, and created layers of integration that only someone deeply familiar with my work could navigate. The systems were perfect, but they were also mine. I made sure all documentation existed, but none of it could replace the years of context and knowledge in my head. 4 months later, I landed a new job offer from another company, $130,000 a year, fully remote, better benefits, and a team that actually valued what I did. I accepted immediately. Then I gave my 2 weeks notice. That's when the panic started. My manager called an emergency meeting. HR wanted to talk. They asked if there was anything they could do to make me stay. I told them politely that my decision was final. They begged for handover documents, extended transition time, and even asked if I'd train a replacement. I agreed, to a point. A few days before my last day, I made them an offer. I'd be happy to continue maintaining their systems as a remote contractor. My rate, $200 an hour. I said it calmly, expecting them to decline. Instead, they exchanged nervous looks, whispered among themselves, and finally agreed. For the next 2 months, I did exactly what I'd been doing before, but now they were paying me 10 times more. By the end of that period, they'd paid me over $35,000. And because I'd set up such an efficient remote workflow, I barely had to do more than 20 hours a week. I even brought on a close friend to help when extra work came in, fully approved under my contract. The change in their attitude was priceless. Suddenly, every email began with, "Hope you're doing well," and ended with, "Thanks so much for your help." My invoices were paid instantly. The same people who once ignored my messages were now treating me like royalty. I never abused the situation. I didn't pad hours or create unnecessary work. I did everything honestly and to a high standard, just as I always had. But this time, I was being compensated for it properly. Every now and then, I'd get messages from old coworkers saying management was still struggling to find a full-time replacement. They'd ask if I'd ever come back. I always replied politely that I was happy with my current job. What I didn't tell them was that nothing could ever top watching the same managers who denied me a promised 15% raise, now cutting me 5-figure checks every few weeks just to keep their systems running. In the end, I didn't need to fight or argue. I just waited, worked smart, and let their own broken promise turn into my best business opportunity.